Welcome back to the Means of Grace podcast, where faith meets real life and context meets connection. I'm Jesse Enniss. You may know me as the Director of Communication for the Leadership Development Team, and I'm joined today by my co-host, John Yeager. John is an ordained elder in our conference and the pastor of Calvary UMC in Charlotte. You doing all right, John?
Well, I'm doing fantastic, Jesse. Let me tell you something. It has been a wild ride, and at the end of the day, the Gators were the champs. Just saying. And we got to go to a really great peace conference. It's been a fantastic few days.
It has been, John.
Awesome. Well, thank you for bringing that up, because today we're reflecting on the powerful experience of the Peace Conference recently held at Lake Junaluska. And we've moved into Holy Week. We'll explore how the themes of peace, action, reconciliation, and profound love are deeply woven into our faith journey. So today we're excited to welcome Reverend Beth Crissman. She's a director of Peacebuilding Ministries and the district superintendent of the Uwharrie district. She also is the one who organized this remarkable gathering, one of the many, I'm assuming. So we're grateful to have you here. Welcome to the podcast, Beth.
Thanks, Jesse. It's great to be with you and John and all of our listeners this morning. So thank you for inviting me to take part.
Thanks for being here, really. I know you're tired. You're just coming off a peace conference. Thank you.
I am a little bleary-eyed, and so hopefully my thoughts and words will be coherent, but I am really excited to talk a little bit more about our phenomenal experience.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. John is going to offer us a little context to swim in during this conversation, because John hates a messy timeline, if you didn't know. Distorted historical context makes him a little bit itchy, and the Peace Conference was just the inspiration he needed, I hear. So before we get into our conversation for today, I wanted us to take a little bit of time and discuss a few things that are going on around the conference. We're excited to share that we recorded the closing worship from the Peace Conference. If you'd like to watch the full service, you can find it now on our YouTube channel. Equip and Connect is continuing throughout the year with virtual monthly sessions. In May, there are 2 sessions, one on May 7th at 6:30 p.m. on building justice through reconciliation, and one on May 19th about cross-racial and cross-cultural ministry. Lastly, annual conference is quickly approaching. We will meet at Lake Junaluska on June 19th to the 22nd. So news about AC 2025 will continue to come out, so we encourage you to stay connected by subscribing to our e-news and by checking out ac2025.org. Now back to our episode with Reverend Beth Crissman. All right, John, clean up the timeline for us.
Well, I'm excited. Thanks, Jesse. Attending the Peace Conference was really cool. It was fun to be around other people who were all concerned, who were all feeling kind of the same feelings, and were moving hopefully in the same general direction. And it reminded me of something, that how little passivity is involved in pacifism. Holy Week is about peace, but it's also about disruption. Jesus enters Jerusalem on a donkey, an animal symbolizing humility and peace, not exactly the grand entrance of the conquering king. This peaceful procession, however, is met with tension, power struggles, betrayal, untimely violence. It's a stark reminder that true peace isn't passive, it's messy, challenging, and almost always uncomfortable. It requires confronting broken systems, speaking truth to power, being willing to sacrifice for something greater than ourselves. Think about this in our context today. We're living in a time when you have to take care of yourself. That's what you're being told. When division feels inevitable, peace seems like a distant dream, and our communities wrestle with fear and uncertainty. Yet Holy Week reminds us that peace isn't just about calming storms. Sometimes it means walking through them. It means seeing beyond the surface of things, beyond our divisions, beyond our politics, to the shared humanity and faith beneath. It's Jesus washing feet, breaking bread with his betrayer, flipping tables, forgiving his tormentors. It's the audacity of resurrection. It's the ultimate act of peace, showing us that violence and death never have the last word. Throughout history, humanity has repeatedly gathered in defiance of the darkness, whether it was the early Christians in secret, civil rights marchers peacefully resisting injustice, or communities coming together after tragedies to heal and hope. The Peace Conference, organized by Beth Crissman at Lake Junaluska, embodies this resilient spirit. It's a testament to our shared calling to unite, stand together, and boldly face the challenges of our world, knowing that when we gather, darkness can never extinguish the light we collectively bear. Beth, I can't wait to talk about the Peace Conference. The bishop mentioned it in one of his Facebook posts that Christ is our peace. We make peace not with our friends, but with our enemies. There is no peace without justice. There is no personal holiness without social holiness. So if I could just dive in, what sparked the idea to hold a peace conference?
Yeah, well, we did not start this movement, and we know that, John. So it was back in 2008 when a group of leaders, mostly residents in the Lake Junaluska area, many of them retired, who came together really experiencing some discontent and feeling the need. Back in 2008, of course, it was a different context in 2008. If you think about, for those of us can rewind back to that period, that would have been, right around the time of the recession, where we were really starting to feel the economic tension, feeling the socioeconomic divide as a grower widening chasm. We are still pretty early post 9/11. And so there was especially a lot of interfaith tension and across our nation and around the world. And so this group of leaders came together and began to envision a gathering that would look at how to begin becoming advocates of peace within not only a Christian context, but also an interfaith context. And so they launched the first peace conference in 2009 at Lake Junaluska. And it was originally truly had a focus of an interfaith peace conference. And that took place from about 2009 to 2019. And 2019 was the last peace conference gathering in its first iteration. John and Jesse, I actually attended a couple of the peace conferences during that time. I wasn't part of the leadership. I was a participant. And when the peace conference didn't happen after 2019, I made an assumption, like many of us have, that when something stopped in 2020, it stopped. Why? Well, because of the pandemic, right? And so I just always assumed that's why the peace conference had not been resurrected or started again. But then once Bishop Carter and I started talking with the original organizers, we learned that, in fact, that original group of organizers and planners for the conference truly envisioned it as a 10-year conference. They thought it would take place for about 10 years, and then that it would be time for them to kind of pass the leadership off to a new season of leaders.
I like that, actually.
Isn't that amazing?
That's
Yeah. And
Wow.
that they decided to, because they knew at that point in context, not only in their own season of life and ministry,
Sure.
but maybe in the socio-political context, that we would see what the landscape would open up next. So that's why the conference stopped in 2019. And when Bishop Carter graciously invited me to enter into this dual role, in addition to serving as a district superintendent, to be the director of Peacebuilding Ministries. We began talking early last spring about bringing back the Peace Conference. But we began an intentional conversation, and we did gather with some of those original organizers to kind of hear their journey
Sure.
of leadership through the conference. But then thought, okay, in what ways do we want to bring forward that which preceded us in the previous peace conferences? And in what ways has our landscape and our context changed? And how might we re-envision, reimagine a peace conference in this day and time? And a couple of things really, using your words, sparked. What sparked our imagination with this? What really became the fuel in the new reimagined peace conference? And there were a couple of things. One, really talking about that Pentecostal moment and what does it mean to truly be the church in an evolving and emerging time. We are very clear that we need to pour into the next generation of leaders for sustainable peace building and shalom. This can't be a gathering for those of us who've been doing this for many, many years. It is that, yes, there is the wisdom and experience in the room that we need to lean into. But then we also need to invite and engage the voices of younger generations and to intentionally pour in to equipping and empowering younger generations for peace building in an ever evolving and unfolding context. So that really was the spark for relaunching not the previous peace conference, but a reimagined peace conference that brought
And I
forward
love that.
and gleaned from the best of what has gone before us.
I love that, and what you said, that 10-year thing, it has a built-in mechanism for, okay, this generation's done. They're not done, so to speak, but now their background, their advisors, they're just there
That's
for
right.
advice if you want it and for the historical context. But this is now somebody else's show because, and I love that. Golly,
Yeah, I love that too.
And there on our design team, we had 2 or 3 of the original design team planners who were part of our design team this year. So, they represented a voice, but that was informative and helped shape things moving forward. And we can talk more when you're ready, John. I mean, even the space in which we created in the Peace Conference brought forward what had preceded us, but it also really, we tried to embody anew. What is
because
this?
you were given that freedom because it was
exactly.
over. So now I think the hard question has to be: when y'all met, did y'all immediately go, okay, this is a 10 years? Did y'all are y'all leaning into, okay, that this is what they did, and we are living in that blessing? How do we do that? Are we going to just do this for 10 years and go, this is it, and let somebody else then do?
Yeah, I would say probably not, John.
Oh, we got to build that in. Ooh.
And so even though that is part of the historical foundation, I think there will be an ongoing assessment. I think what we know in this context is that really becoming peace builders and advocates of sustainable shalom is going to be a long haul marathon for us. Yeah.
No, 10 years is a long time.
Oh, yeah. 10
My
years
goodness.
is, but when you think about the work that is ahead of us, I think we will obviously not be done in 10 years.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And it's
We will
cool
not-
that there was the faith you have to have that somebody's going to remember those 10 years like you did and go and miss it so much that then you go looking for it and
Right. Yeah.
it's born again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just a testament to the first 10 years.
That's right. That's right.
I love how, like, from the very beginning you were focusing on the next generation.
Yes.
I always go back to the passage of scripture where Moses is kind of handing things off to Joshua, but Joshua's been on the scene, Joshua's being poured into for years and years, so that when that time comes, and I'm sure Moses didn't know that when that time was coming, that we could finally hand that off. But the nation of Israel continues. It goes from the wilderness to the promised land, but having a leader, and I think similarly, I can kind of see that same vein with the peace conference. Because to your point, I mean, my father-in-law always says, like, when you get to a certain age, the years just fly by, right?
Right,
And
right,
so,
right.
like, when you're a kid, 10 years is a long time. But when when you start to get to like 30 plus, it's like 10 years just flies by, And so, 10 years might sound a lot or seem like a
Yeah, I
lot
know,
on
right?
paper, but
And
it's
it's
just gonna
just
fly by.
Right. Well, Jesse, you actually use the verbiage of handing off, and the imagery that is so powerful for me is a relay race and passing the
Hmm.
baton.
Hmm.
And if you've ever been part of a relay, or even just an observer of relay races, you know what is really critical is the running along beside. There
Hmm.
has
it's
to
that,
be
yeah.
Hmm.
time where the two are running side by side, and one is just dropping back while the other is moving forward. But that's the only way. It is the handoff
Hmm.
is where the race is won or lost, is how we do that handing off, and that requires a running side by side. And that is really true in our mentoring, in our generational leadership. And that was really key. We knew within the Peace Conference is we needed the wisdom of those who've gone before us, and to be able to begin passing the baton to the next generation of leaders. And, I'm wise enough to know that I will be in this for a season, and then there are others who will come along beside me. And so, I mean, as recent as this weekend, I had conversations about others who starting next year will come along beside me
Oh,
and
that must
be
have
a
felt so good.
director of the Peace Conference, so that we are all the time preparing for the passing of this from one generation to the next. It is absolutely essential. It's just a healthy model of leadership, period.
Hmm.
But I think the more important the task, the more critical it is that we do this paying it forward and passing it forward is. We have to do
Hmm.
this well. If it's important enough, we will do it well.
And I can't think of a lot of other things that are as important as peace. And it's one of
Absolutely.
those things that, like, you might think that, oh yeah, we're all on board for peace. It'll just happen because we all want peace, right? But it's one of those things that you really do have to put in the work. Like John was saying earlier, like it's not passive work. You know what I mean?
No.
And so I'm just grateful that you have received the baton and that you are running the race right now. I think from I've never personally like organized something like this, but I have been a part of things like this in the past, and got a little bit of a glimpse into what's going on behind the curtain. So I was wondering, like, I know it's definitely challenging. How did it all come together? Like, how can we help our listeners see behind the curtain a little
Yeah.
bit?
Right. Thanks, Jesse. That's great. So, yeah, I mean, there are many facets to how an event such as a peace conference takes place. But I think, one of the key pieces is beginning with, okay, what is going to be our theme? What will be the primary focus that we're going to have to really begin shaping the thematic work, if you will, so that whether someone is doing registration, they're helping organize worship, they're working on plenary speakers or workshop leaders, that we are all moving in the same direction, and that we know that no matter where people are encountering the peace conference, they're coming away with a unified experience and message. So that, I would say that was one of the primary things. And so we established pretty early on, as early as about a year ago, this time last year, that we really wanted to focus this year on Ephesians 2, where we hear that that Christ is our peace, as you mentioned, John, that Bishop Carter posted in one of his posts this past weekend while at the conference, that comes directly from Ephesians 2. And we hear in that text that we are called to break down the dividing walls. And that the dividing walls, this is really important for us to hear, the dividing walls are not our differences. Is the hostilities that we have toward one another in the midst of those differences. And so that really was the focus of the conference, is helping understand that we are being called to break down the dividing walls, and then to begin naming what is it that's dividing us. And then also to be able to articulate, and what is it, therefore, is the hope that can heal us, so that we can have sustainable shalom, really leaning into that Hebrew concept and definition of shalom, not a flattened, simplified, comfortable definition of peace. That is the absence of conflict. Conflict, by the way, having differing views, opinions, wishes, needs, and desires that strike together. We always will have conflict. We're not talking about a conference that is working to remove all differences. We're talking about learning how to be practitioners of finding and seeking sustainable shalom, completeness, wholeness, holiness, sanctification from a Wesleyan perspective in the midst of our diversity, in the midst of different opinions, in the midst of conflict. How do we become agents of sustainable shalom for all people? And that kind of brings in something y'all mentioned a few minutes ago, and that is, there can be no sustainable shalom and peace without justice. So if you were at the conference, you would have heard just as much talk and emphasis on being agents of justice and mercy as peace building. So those two go hand in hand. Yeah.
Don't confuse peace with quiet.
What was that, John?
I said, don't confuse peace with quiet.
Oh, no. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and going along with what John said too, when I hear you speak, I'm hearing you could do this the easy way, or you could do this the hard way. And what you all have chosen is the hard way, because the easy way is to say, I'm just going to hang out with people who think like me. I'm just going to hang out with people who look like me. And if we ever have any conflict, we're just going to act like that didn't happen. We're going to sweep that under the rug, and we're going to move on and, just kind of act like everything is great. And so everything you've named is not only important, but it's difficult to cultivate. It's justice is difficult to cultivate. Mercy is difficult to cultivate. Dealing through conflict and just the idea of naming the things that are the dividing walls. Those are the things that we don't like to talk about, because we just want to have fun. Like why do we have to sour the mood? Let's just have fun. You know what I mean? And so you've chosen to do the hard things, but those things are the things that bring forth the most fruit and actually get you to peace. And so I love that you named that.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, I think one of the best summaries of the Peace Conference was I had one of the participants of the conference come up to me on Sunday morning during our closing worship and say, I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting, but I didn't realize I was going to come away this uncomfortable.
Yes.
And to know that that's exactly how I need to be feeling. I mean, so, what is your driving purpose of the peace conference? To stir a holy discontent that will move us into action. And so I think that was one of the takeaways of the experience. And if we're honest with ourselves, we had to design. So kind of going back to your question, Jesse, what does it look like behind the curtain? Well, it requires, when you begin planning and designing an event like this, to say, yeah, some of these plenary speakers, some of these workshops are going to create a holy discontent, are going to make us uncomfortable. But if our purpose is to empower people for action, then, the old coaching concept, we won't change a behavior until our current behavior becomes uncomfortable enough. And so sometimes it takes turning up the pain factor, the discontent, the discomfort to say, okay, we've got to do things differently moving forward. So, yeah, that was one thing. And I would say there was a very distinctive other design factor, going back to your question, Jesse, and that is that might have been somewhat of a difference of the previous iteration of the Peace Conference. We were very, very clear that we wanted the Peace Conference and we will continue to want the Peace Conference to be open and invitational to all people. In the welcome on Friday morning, I acknowledged and welcomed people of all faith traditions and people of no faith tradition. And I said, we are so grateful that you are here, and we need you to be here.
Yes, in common purpose.
Common purpose. You're exactly right, John. We are all in this together. And we are owning that this will be a Christian gathering. It is being sponsored and designed in many ways from people within the Christian tradition, even within our United Methodist tradition, in no ways to be exclusive at all. That is not the intent. But then I also clarified that the reason we have chosen to specifically address the Christian church is because whereas this is our distinctive calling to be peacemakers, I mean, blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus said in Matthew 5 on the Sermon on the Mount. This is a distinctive calling for us. And yet we need to confess and acknowledge that we have really dropped the ball. We have really messed up. And in fact, we've perverted the gospel.
Been complicit at times.
And been very complicit, and even not only complicit, because when we stand back and don't say this is wrong, when we don't confront Christian nationalism and the harms that it's doing, then not only are we complicit, we are participating and saying that this is okay. So, we were very clear in saying we've got a lot of work to do within the Christian church to realign with our calling and to realign with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so we have to be able and willing to confront that head on. So I think that was probably a distinctive that maybe it wasn't quite as clear in that focus. And it wasn't.
It was a different time and a different context. It was a different
context. You're exactly right, John. We didn't have the challenges. They were there. Christian nationalism's been there since the founding of this nation.
Well, since the founding, let's go way back, Beth.
That's right. Yeah,
we did not invent this thing.
No, we did not. And it's nationalism. It was Gary Mason in his plenary and workshops. It's great in reminding us that nationalism is part of the human condition, but we can't not address it. Yeah,
that's right. So where the rubber meets the road here, how did the conference go? So you visioned and planned, right? And then the context shifted beneath all of our feet, right? Over the past few months, You
Woo!
powered through peace conference time. How did it go? What conflicts hit in the moment, or what jived? What kind of things all of a sudden, like, wow, everything's resonating all at the same
Yeah,
time. Talk us through
right.
the conference.
Yeah, so one of the things, when you start something afresh and new, and I'll this is my confessional moment. I have a wonderful therapist. I'm grateful. I think every pastor,
Everybody
I
needs
think
one.
every person should have a therapist, by the way. And
Amen.
but
Amen. I'm
and
meeting mine today, so
yeah, way to go,
Yep.
Jesse. I'm right there with you, friend. And I had a mantra that I had to repeat over and over again, and that was, "It will be good enough. It will be good enough." And to trust that sufficiency, it will be what it needs to be, and to really kind of let go of the outcome. I knew that by the end of the first iteration, by 2019, that we had ended around 100 participants at the conference, and I thought, if we start back there, we're kind of starting where we
That's
left
right.
off, and then we can grow from there. Beth's personal goal was like, oh gosh, wouldn't it be great if we could hit 150? So we were pretty blown away when we had 205 registrants.
Hey,
awesome.
And
Awesome.
so
love it.
we were, and I think what that indicated, I really think what that showed us, friends, was that there was a discontent, an unrest. There was a hunger to gather, to be with people who may not be 100% like-minded, but at least we had a shared common purpose. We were there because we want to see things change. And so I not only from my own experience, but the feedback that we've already received. We'll be doing a formal evaluation by the end of this week. But people said, wow, this is what I have been hungering for. This is what I needed. There was significant consistency and alignment in that message. I think one of the really rich components that we don't want to lose is our participating bishops, which were just amazing. We had 4 amazing bishops. Of course, Bishop Carter, who was our host bishop. We also had Bishop Kanitham Begum Sai, and Bishop Connie Shelton, and Bishop Robin Deese. All of them not only came and brought messages, they dwelled among us for the conference. There was a presence, John. I would say the same thing with our 4 plenary speakers, who were absolutely amazing. They
And
didn't fly
available, very
in.
available. Yep.
And available. They were there. They were participating in the workshops. They were sitting, with the people, participating in worship, in the conversations, having lunch with folks. There was, and the same thing with all of our phenomenal workshop leaders. There was a full pouring into, we are in this work together. So I think not only was there a shared message and purpose, there was shared participation. I will share one experience that was a stressful event, because you asked about
Yes.
kind of the behind the curtain.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna claim this as what we know in the United Methodist tradition as prevenient grace. That grace that goes before us, things that are happening outside of our efforts, but where we see God weaving things together. I am sure, or many of our listeners will also be aware of the hands-off movement that has taken place across our nation. These are secular gatherings of people in large cities, in small towns, all across the U.S. The big day for this gathering nationwide was Saturday of the Peace Conference.
Yeah.
That was not planned. I mean, I had so many
I
people
was going to
saying,
ask about that.
no, of course not. We found
Yeah.
out about it
Wow.
2 weeks before the Peace Conference.
Wow.
And of all the days, that it was on Saturday when we had the longest lunch break. We had a 2-hour lunch break. And so here's part of the behind the curtain. And only did we not plan that there would be a peace demonstration that was taking place one of the gatherings would be in the town, in Waynesville, just 10 minutes from where we were gathered at Lake Junaluska. But someone said, oh, I got a call on like Wednesday before the peace conference. And by the way, we're in cabinet meeting. So, I've got my other hat on of district superintendent. We're trying to set up for the peace conference, which registration started Thursday afternoon. Can y'all organize a charter bus for everyone to get from Lake Junaluska?
Oh, my.
The first part of me who wants to do everything right and try to do, and I'm like, okay, can we pull this together? And then I realized that logistically, that was just a nightmare. And there's just no way we could do it. And then it occurred to me, wait a minute. One of the key components of peace building is grassroots community organizing. And so on Friday morning, let folks know about the hands-off demonstration that was taking place. And I said, friends, we have a beautiful opportunity here. We have the opportunity to exercise grassroots community organizing. We are all being challenged to organize ourselves. How are we going to carpool? How are we going to get this body into downtown Waynesville, participate in the demonstration, and then come back and re-engage in the peace conference once again? Because even that, our going to the demonstration was part of the peace conference. It was putting feet to pavement in what we were learning, and it worked. So sometimes you just have to let go and say, you know what? The people can do this. This doesn't have to be held on to by a small group of organizers. Let the people organize, and they'll take the work forward. So
I like that story. I like the beginning of it, of your initial reaction being very, personally toxic, as we all can be. I can do this. I got this.
Let me control this. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, hey.
And all of a sudden just going, whoa, maybe letting go is actually an even better idea than even if I were to come through with this crazy thought. That's cool.
So it was great. It was beautiful to watch. It really was.
Well, looking ahead, what are your hopes for the future? I'm sure you've probably gone over in your head all of the wonderful things that you were able to accomplish, maybe some of the things that you were hoping for that didn't quite pan out, but it sounds like there's things that happened that you couldn't have even dreamed of that ended up working in your favor. So how, with all of that ruminating in your mind, how do you envision continuing the momentum of these important conversations and gatherings for peace?
Give us a few years, and then give us a the next 2 peace conferences from now. You're not even there anymore. You're just like, oh, I'm so glad these kids today are putting together this peace conference.
But I'll be there. I'll be there, Jesse. Even if I'm not on the design team,
you'll be just reveling in it, right?
I'll be there. That's right. That's right. So, So, of course, I am a strategic thinker. I'm a visionary. So that kind of work is natural for me, to think about the what's next and where
fun part, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I will go out on a limb a little bit, and share a dream, a vision that I think started to unfold in the midst of the peace conference. So we had 7 different conferences across the United Methodist Connection who participated in this year's peace conference. Okay, so this was already a United Methodist Connection peace conference, even in its initial relaunch. But I truly envision that this could tap into the peace conference, could tap and emerge from the best of who we are as a people called Methodist. I believe that we have not only the connectional structure and beauty, but we have the resources and the capacity to be the yeast that transforms the whole, through the type of work of the peace conference. That if this were to become even a denominational wide peace gathering every year that said, this is at the core of who we are as a people called Methodist. That one of the images, Gary Mason brought to us, reminding us about that we are a two-winged bird of personal holiness and social holiness, and that the best of what peacemaking is embracing the personal and social holiness of what it means to enter into that space. What would it look like if the Peace Conference is part of a movement within the United Methodist Church to be actionable advocates for sustainable peace and justice for people, yes, within the United States, across the U.S., but also around the world? Friends, I think we have the power and the means by which to do that. And it's not that the Peace Conference is the answer to that, but it I think could
But it
be
could be
a piece of
be,
that,
yeah.
an
Yeah.
important piece of moving that forward. We can move that needle. We can move that stylus that says we can do this, because sustainable peace is only going to come when we partner together. And again, not to be exclusive, and to say we want people of all traditions and no faith tradition to partner with us and to come to the Peace Conference, as happened this past year, but to also be unashamedly intentional about saying, and we think that we must do this as a people called Methodist, because this is at the core of who we are. This is at the core of who we are, of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.
Love
So
it.
That's
there
cool that
you
you
go.
said that.
Yeah.
Because when I went to the Disarming Hearts and Forging Peace, the guys that chop up the guns.
Yeah, raw tools.
Rod Tools, Stan Wilson, and Scotty.
Dan and Scotty Oots.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Raw Tools. Yeah, what was cool was, I can't remember which one of them, just kind of randomly, because they're not necessarily United Methodist, so but he goes, I couldn't help but notice that on your logo, your symbol, you have a flame representing the spirit. And he goes, I love that. Of course, he's forging things, right? And he goes, that's fantastic. And he just was that my wheelhouse. But then when you're talking about sparks and the flame that can ignite things, and what he was talking about, and how we might be uniquely purposed
That's right.
in some way to be that, that's cool. I like that.
I love that.
And that was a cool couple of guys too. Raw Tools.
They're awesome.
Yep.
And they'll be back next year for sure.
Awesome. Well, okay, Beth, I am weird in that I really like to hear things that people have failed at, because I feel like we learn so much more from our failures than we do from our successes. And then, there's that quote out there that says, like, a smart person learns from their mistakes, a wise person learns from the mistakes of others. So,
But we're
I'm putting you on
conditioned
the
to hide
spot.
them.
We are conditioned to hide them. But I think, everything that you shared today has been so inspiring, right? That I wouldn't want someone to hear of, like, how great it was and think, oh, that's so great, but I could never do that, So, you might not have anything, but I before you go, I'd like to ask, was there something that you would personally consider like a failure of yours that that you learned a lot from, and like, what did you learn from that?
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Jesse. And I'm with you. I think it's really important for us. I love I don't know if you've ever heard the RAD process: reflect, adjust, do, and we've really talked about as a design team that we've got to be intentional over our next month, to really take some time, reflect, and say what went well. Ooh, what did we not do so well? What do we need to adjust so we can do this better? We can refine and learn and grow. So, just real briefly, I would say, and part of this was just the time frame and the process by which I received kind of this responsibility and task to be the director of the Peace Conference. I unintentionally, very unintentionally, became a funnel, and so that as the planning and execution of the Peace Conference, you know, and and it started gradually, but then I want to say it hit really kind of late fall, early winter when appointment processes, or in my other work as that
Right.
other full-time job
Well,
I
and
had.
when everybody also got all hot and
Right,
everything happened.
and we're in the midst of a natural disaster,
Oh
and
gosh, yes.
disaster
Forgot about
recovery, and there's all those pieces, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, we have created a funnel where everything is coming through me. This is always an unhealthy model of leadership. We've got to change this next time. So we started to make some adjustments even midstream in this year's conference, but already in the design, we have started establishing distinctive teams that will be responsible for different parts of the planning and implementation and evaluation for next year's conference and future conferences. So I would say avoid the funnel because unless you're trying to get a lot of liquid into a small opening, it might be great. Tool in the kitchen, but it is a terrible model for leadership. So don't be a funnel. Don't be a
Thank you
funnel.
so much for sharing that. Reverend
Oh,
Beth
thank
Crissman,
you, Beth, really. And for everything. Thank
director
you.
of Yeah, absolutely. She's the director of Peacebuilding Ministries and the district superintendent of the Uwharrie district. We want to thank you so much for your time today, for inspiring all of us, and especially inspiring us to do the difficult work of peace building. And so I'm really,
Together.
really glad that our listeners got a chance to hear from you today. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Jesse. Thank you, John. And mark your calendars now, March 13th through 15th,
All right.
2026. Put it on
March
your
13th
calendar.
through 15th. Thank
Great.
you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Oh, we want to again thank Beth so much for being on here with us on the Means of Grace podcast. We want to do our strangely heartwarming segment here on Means of Grace. I was at the Peace Conference, and I want to share two moments that were both very strange and changed my perspective a little bit and heartwarming. The first was actually something Dan Pizzette, district superintendent at Metro District, reminded me of at the conference. Was they showed a video of a young Nelson Mandela, pre any jail time. And I read a lot about his life, and it was very interesting. But I'd never seen a video of it, so it was interesting to hear his tone and to see how he moved and how different that he became, obviously, for his decades in prison, but how he was once a little more brash, just more, and I say sure of himself in a kind of a cocky way and a certainty, and then you hear him in his older voice, and it's so much more measured. But it just offered me this very strange perspective because I'd always, in my mind, and hearing him as this old, wise, right, kind of Nelson Mandela. That's And the second thing was, and I forget his name, so forgive me, but I bumped into a gentleman at the conference. We were having a great time talking, and we were talking about peace, and he was telling me about his experiences. And then he talked about how he taught at Florida Southern College for a couple of decades, which is in Lakeland, Florida. And he taught sociology. And I said, when? And he told me the years. I said, well, I was there in 03, 04, 05. And he almost fell down. And it was just one of those really cool moments where we just shared that strange experience. And it was heartwarming. And we connected, and it was great. So that's a pitch for the connection, for the conference, for the Peace Conference, for all of it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, again, like you said, thanks to Reverend Beth Crissman for an amazing conversation today, and for an amazing peace conference. So as we close today's episode, let's remember that the peace is an active journey of justice. We got to throw justice in there. We got to throw mercy in there. We got to throw just healthy conflict in there.
Throw it all in there.
Throw it all in there. But most importantly, compassion and love. Especially significant as we are entering into Holy Week, as this recording will drop. So may we all become instruments of that peace in our communities and in our world. Keep your eyes open for a Heather Hahn article for News about the Peace Conference. But thanks for joining us on the Means of Grace podcast. Again, remember to subscribe, to share. Let us know your thoughts. And until next time, may grace and peace guide your way. Peace.